Hello everybody and welcome to the latest video series from chess24.com. Today I'm honored on a very warm day in Hamburg to be joined by my colleague and a former world champion of chess, believe it or not, Mr. Rustam Kazımcanov. Rustam, what are we going to learn today?
First of all, it's nice to be here in Hamburg. And I wanted to show you some games of Capablanca.
Okay, I've heard of Capablanca.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure most of our viewers have heard of Capablanca as well, but maybe some of the games have been forgotten by now. I wanted to show how Capablanca used some basic strategic elements to win his games. And I suggest we start with his game against Dus Khatimirsky. This is one of his earlier games. And he used pins very consistently throughout the game to win this game.
Before we get started, I'm aware this is not a biography series, but to fill in our viewers who might not have heard of Capablanca, can we tell them a little something? I know a bit. Capablanca, he was a world chess champion between 1921 and 1927, if I recall correctly, beating Lasker in a match and then losing to Alekhine later. He's generally considered one of the biggest chess prodigies there ever has been, right?
Well, yes, for sure. Yeah, he is definitely one of the most talented players to have ever played. Although we should also understand that he probably worked a bit more than we generally
wanted to make us believe. Well, that's a common chess player habit, right? If you ask any grandmaster, he never spends any time looking at chess. So he might have been a natural player, but he must have put in some work as well, is what we're assuming.
Yes, also given that he did not play as much as a modern grandmaster would normally play, I guess he was filling in the time in between the tournaments with some serious chess training. Also, in general, we believe that no chess progress is possible without serious chess work.
I'm afraid so. So let's get this rolling on this fake lazy guy.
So let's...
Mr. Capablanca against... No, Mr. Dus Khatimirsky against Capablanca.
You know, this guy, Dus Khatimirsky, was the first Uzbek champion.
I've never heard of him.
He was not even Uzbek, but during World War I think he got deported to Uzbekistan, or somehow ended up in Uzbekistan and won the first Uzbek championship. So he's kind of my great predecessor.
Ah,
you see?
Congratulations.
Thank you. So in this particular position, Capablanca was black. As you see, he's pawned down, but he has two bishops as compensation, and that's about it, basically. His pieces are very nice. He has two bishops, but White's position is pretty solid, and White hopes to consolidate his pawn and slowly convert if possible, and Black should try to keep the game going and avoid the exchanges. It's interesting to observe the very first move of Capablanca. He played bishop d7. Now, slightly mysterious looking move. I explain it to myself because it also looks mysterious to me, as I guess it would look to most of our viewers. He's trying to keep pieces because he understands that sooner or later along the d file there could be some exchanges. And because he's pawned down, he needs to fight for compensation. He's trying to block the d file physically now to keep his rooks. It's a very interesting concept. The second thing which is important for our theme is that bishop d7 creates, slightly unusually, creates a pin of the pawn on c3.
What's our theme? It's pins, yeah?
It's pins, yeah. Theme is pins. He is creating a slightly unusual pin of the pawn on c3 to enable him to go b4.
Okay, so let's see what happens. White has to untangle his pieces. He went knight somewhere. He
went knight f1. One of the reasons he went knight f1 is undoubtedly because he was worried about some possible attack on the king side. He thought maybe he doesn't have enough pieces on the king side, especially since bishop appeared on d7, showing in the direction of the pawn on h3. So White's attention got diverted slightly towards king side. Capablanca played knight f4, continuing in the same vein, indicating the king side as possible field of action. Once again, eyeing the pawn on h3, and thus Khatimierski felt forced to do something about it and played a slightly awkward move, knight g3. I think in general trying to just bring another piece to the king side, protecting the king, although the king was not really in danger. And now Capablanca played b4.
I'm waiting for the pin. This is the first pin I'm spotting. We can't take the pawn because then we lose the queen.
Yeah, once again, this is the pin, and it also, in general, opening some diagonals for the bishops and some new lines. Black is creating some play for the pawn, but so far there is not much immediate danger. White played knight e2, trying to get rid of the annoying knight on f4. I mean, he could take bishop takes f4, but then he would weaken some more squares, and this diagonal and the square on e3 could become pretty strong for black.
Yeah, clearly black is fine here.
Yeah, so white played knight e2, and black could do different things. I mean, the move like, for instance, knight e6 could also keep some compensation for the pawn and could be pretty organic, but what Kappa did is, I think, more annoying for white. He played g5, just keeping the knight on its strong position on f4. And now if white takes on f4, he should also take into consideration the possible recapture g takes f4.
Opening the g file so we can checkmate later.
One day the rook will appear on the g file, and as we know from King's Indian, defending against this could prove pretty tricky. So after g5, white played knight c1.
Well, these knight maneuvers look a bit silly to me, right? Knight f1, knight g3, knight e2, knight c1. It's not all that constructive.
I think White's main problem in the game was that he was not understanding what black threatens.
Well, black isn't really threatening anything, is it?
Black isn't threatening very much indeed, yeah. I think knight c1 has the purpose of defending against the eventual possible, sometimes move rook a2. Because rook a2 is connected to some pressure along the second rank and creates some ideas with bishop a4. So at the time, I think Khatimierski believed he was doing something useful, and his position is still very, very robust. And black played rook dc8. He strengthens the pin on the c file, thus liberating the queen for some action.
Also liberating the bishop so it can move around without exchanging the rooks, which probably black doesn't want.
Yes, as we mentioned earlier, he's trying to keep all the pieces, and white doesn't have many constructive moves. White is slightly on the defensive here, despite the pawn up, and he felt he should do something about it, and played c4.
Panic.
I'm not sure it is panic. It is a reasonable move because he's actually trying to go b3, and after he goes b3, he will have all his pawns nicely protected. And
so for the slower among us like me, queen takes c4 doesn't work because the bishop on d7 would be hanging, right?
Yes, and that would be pretty bad news for black. And white would win. And also...
and the positional threat is to just play b3 and strengthen that pawn, and then just have a passed pawn, protected passed pawn.
Yes, I mean, black would still have some sort of play for the pawn, like after bishop e6, b3, h5, but white will already have solved at least his problems.
White's situation has improved, clearly.
At least on the queen side, yeah.
Yeah, okay, somewhere.
So it's actually interesting to see Capablanca create initiative or maintain his initiative from this position. And now we are coming into the very theme of our video. Capablanca played b3.
So the theme of our video is giving away pawns for no apparent reason.
Well, the theme I thought was pins.
Oh, okay.
That's why we're giving pawns.
That's why I'm asking you, where's the pin?
The pin is about to come. B3 is an interesting move because it also serves a prophylactic purpose. B3 physically prevents white from playing B3. So now white has to come up with something else. The tactical justification is that if white takes queen takes b3, then black plays bishop a4 and wins some material.
What's the word for that? Do you call it a skewer? I'm not so good with.
I think you call it a skewer, yeah.
Skewer? Okay.
And I think you would also call it, you call it a skewer only if the queen is on b3 and rook on d1. If rook was on b3 and queen was on d1, then you would call it a pin, yeah. Yeah, that's interesting, yeah, interesting distinction. In fact, white here had to be accurate and had to avoid the possible pins by going queen, for instance, c3. And would have a pretty complex, pretty unbalanced position after that. Instead, he took knight takes b3, thinking that with 2 pawns up he shouldn't have problems. And in fact,
are we finally getting to the pin part?
Finally getting to the pin, because after bishop a4, this pin is already there, it's clearly unpleasant, and the first attempt to get rid of the pin by going knight c3 would actually bring around more trouble, because after queen takes c4 also the knight on c3 would be pinned.
Right.
So you see both white knights are pinned because the queen on c2 would be hanging if they move, and white is beginning to lose material very, very seriously. So this is one of the intrinsic qualities of a pin. The pinned side often loses the material. So white is trying to prevent this. The knight on b3 is going to be attacked very soon with serious consequences, so white is naturally trying to protect it. And now if black would follow up with rook a b8, then white could go something like rook a1, because the knight on b3 is protected now, and black would not have immediate ways of capitalizing upon his initiative. So here comes another move which creates a pin. Black plays bishop d4. So not only black is attacking the knight on d2 to leave the knight on b3 without protection, but also creating another pin, because rook on a1 is also vulnerable now, and basically white cannot move very much at all. And
it's also a nice example for the power of bishops against knights here, because it looks like the bishops are completely dominating the knights. They could take the knights at any time. The knights are struggling.
Yeah, this is actually one of the things which occurred to me only very recently. And knights cannot pin.
No, but they can fork.
They can fork, but they cannot
Also
pin.
nice.
Most
Forking knights.
Yeah, most of the pieces are actually capable of pinning. The rook can pin, the queen can pin, the bishop can pin.
Can the pawn pin?
The pawn cannot pin, and the king cannot pin.
No, that makes sense.
That makes sense, yeah. So, but you see, one of the advantages of the bishop is this long range, and it also allows some serious pinning action in this case. And white tried g3.
Looks a bit desperate.
It looks desperate, but black's threat of rook a b8 in this position, winning material.
No, white's position looks bad, I understand.
Yeah, white somehow didn't find the proper move. He thought, okay, he gets rid of this knight, and then he'll think, because knight h3, king g2 is distracting black from where he wants to play. So black played knight e6. And now white at least got one square for his queen to go to, at least to weaken this pin somewhat. But in fact, black's position is so strong that he's winning material by different means. Played rook d8, queen e2. Now already he could win either of the exchanges. He could go bishop b3, knight b3, bishop takes e1, or he could go bishop takes d2, knight takes d2, and bishop takes d1. But after either of these exchange wins, the position would not have been clear at the end, because white still has his 2 pawns as compensation for the exchange.
Another language question. Exchange is both rook versus knight and rook versus bishop, right? One doesn't make a distinction there. If we talk about winning the exchange, it's either winning a rook for a bishop or for a knight. So in this case, it would be for a bishop, right?
Yeah, indeed, yeah. It's in fact a slightly strange word.
Yeah, it's an odd word. I mean, one gets used to it around chess, but it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Because it's not really an exchange. You're actually winning material by having a rook for a minor piece. In fact, interestingly, many other languages have the word quality for this.
Yes.
You win some quality. It's still the same piece, but it's of higher quality. But here, in fact, the power of the pin is so serious that black is in no hurry at all to win the material immediately, but in fact plays rook ab8, bringing another piece to attack the knight on b3. And white is so paralyzed because of all these pins that he cannot do very much at all.
He cannot unpin.
He cannot unpin. I mean, he can start, he did with rook f1, at least
unpinning one of the rooks.
Unpinned the knight on d2, but since the knight is protecting another knight, he cannot move it anyway.
Oh yeah, he's unpinning the knight, not the rook. I'm trying to get the term straight. Right.
Well, you'll get there, yeah, don't worry. But here, black is already winning material with more decisive effect than before. Played bishop takes d2, knight takes d2, bishop takes d1. So we see finally the pins are resolved, or at least that's what white thought. But as a matter of fact, now whatever white does, he'll be subject to new pins. For instance, after rook takes d1, rook takes b2. The knight on d2 is still pinned, and it's also pinned in both directions. And black can reinforce the pin with queen d7, and again white clearly will be losing more material due to the strength of the pin. He tried queen takes d1, rook takes b2, queen c1, rook a2, and now black is technically winning. And it's only interesting to see that the pin was used once again by Capablanca to the decisive effect at the end of this game.
Okay, show us the end, because here I think, yeah, it's clear black has more material and nice pieces, so he should win the game.
Yes, and he won the game with remarkable ease. After rook f2, rook d3, he just activated all his pieces. Rook a3. It's interesting that he decided to keep both rooks because people often tend to exchange material when they are something up, but in this case black's rooks are clearly very, very active, and white has a lot of weaknesses on the third rank, so keeping the rooks is very useful. And here, okay, white got increasingly desperate, played f4, and this sped up the disaster, and several moves later in already very winning position. After rook takes f3, rook takes f3, queen g2 check. Black is winning in many ways, but in fact, once again, there was a pin on the back rank, and the move rook g3, justified by the spin, stopped white's resistance.
Queen g3 would also have been quite good.
Queen g3 would have been good, but less cruel.
Yeah.
And white resigned, and you saw in this game that by consistently using pins, Capablanca first got the advantage, capitalized on his advantage, and at the end used a pin decisively to finish his opponent off. And this was it for Capablanca's usage of the pins. In our next videos we will deal with Capablanca using different strategic elements to win his games.
Thanks for watching, everybody, and see you around in the next videos. Bye.